When I opened my pay stub, I thought it was a mistake. My monthly salary had been slashed by $1,800, without warning, without explanation. At that exact moment, during a Zoom call, my boss smiled and said, "We're streamlining operations to impress the new board." I felt the blood drain from my face. I was the sacrifice. Have you ever sat through a meeting knowing you were being quietly humiliated, but had to keep a straight face? Some cuts bleed silently, especially when they come from people who smile while doing it. If you've ever stayed quiet, not out of fear but strategy, you're not alone. Sometimes silence is how storms gather. I didn't flinch. I muted my mic, turned off the camera, and leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. All I could hear was the soft hum of my desktop and Langford's smug voice echoing through the speakers. He was pitching cost-cutting measures to our finance team, selling it like innovation. But I knew what it really was: a performance, a desperate audition for the new board of directors. I'm Sophia Harwicki, strategic finance lead at Axiom Corp. I've spent 9 years building systems that helped this company save millions, quietly, without applause. I've never asked for credit, and I've never played politics. That's how I liked it. My work spoke for itself. No one at Axiom knew who my father was, not even my closest colleague. I never wanted to be the CEO's daughter. I wanted to be seen as what I truly am: sharp, capable, and earned. Not inherited. But that afternoon, staring at my gutted salary and the blinking cursor on my HR portal, I realized something. Sometimes silence is mistaken for weakness. And sometimes wolves wear $700 blazers and use spreadsheets to draw blood. Langford, my manager, wasn't always like this. He used to praise my work, used to seek my input on every strategic call. But ever since the announcement that the old board was stepping down and a new executive team would be appointed, he changed. He became performative, suddenly obsessed with optics, using phrases like executive alignment, and asking people to submit justification memos for their salaries. It was laughable until it hit me. Mine had already been slashed. I emailed HR. No reply. I called my compensation rep straight to voicemail. By 3 p.m., I was sitting in the back stairwell of the 17th floor, phone in hand, scrolling through credit card bills, calculating what I could cut. My mother's medication? Non-negotiable. My car lease? Possibly. The therapy sessions I started last year to cope with burnout? I stared at the app, finger hovering over cancel. Then I remembered the pen. A sleek silver pen with my initials engraved. A gift from my father on my first day at Axiom. He told me, "Write your own story. Don't let anyone else hold the pen." I hadn't thought about it in years. But that day, I took it out of my drawer and slipped it into my blazer pocket. Not as a sign of privilege, but as a reminder. I didn't cry. I didn't complain. I just sat with the truth. Langford didn't cut my salary because I underperformed. He cut it because I was quiet, effective, and easy to dismiss. Because he assumed I had no power. He was wrong. By Monday morning, I had already sent 3 follow-up emails to HR. Not one response. Not even a system-generated acknowledgement. I started to wonder if my email address had been ghosted from the inside. Or worse, if my name had become something people whispered about behind closed doors. At lunch, I walked past the glass-walled conference room and saw Langford sitting with 2 junior analysts, one of whom used to report directly to me. They were reviewing one of my previous forecasts, a cost optimization model I had personally built and revised for 2 quarters. Langford looked up, saw me through the glass, and gave me a curt nod. No invitation to join. Not even a mention, just a nod. The kind you give someone who's already halfway out the door. I smiled politely and kept walking, but my chest ached. Not from the snub itself, but from the quiet way it kept happening. People were no longer rude. They were just distant, polite, as if I'd become invisible. It didn't stop there. That afternoon, my calendar pinged. A weekly strategy meeting I had led for over a year had been reassigned to Jenna, A new hire who had once asked me how to calculate net working capital. No warning, no explanation. I checked the guest list. My name wasn't on it. By Wednesday, my desk had been moved. Facilities said it was a seating optimization. I now sat next to the printer room, across from the break closet. The new girl got my old corner desk. Sunlight, quiet, and privacy included. That night, I got home and found my mother asleep on the couch, her glucose monitor blinking red. I sat beside her, gently placing a blanket over her legs, and tried not to cry. I'd been covering most of her medical costs myself since her insurance was cut back last year. With the salary reduction, I didn't know how much longer I could stretch things. I looked at the stack of unopened bills on the kitchen counter and felt something I rarely allowed myself to feel. Helpless. I didn't call my father, not yet. I knew what he'd say. He'd be furious. He'd want to step in, fix it all, fire Langford himself. But if I allowed him to fix it, this story wouldn't be mine anymore. It would just be another tale of a CEO's daughter hiding behind her father's shadow. No, that wasn't me. But still, I was exhausted. The kind of tired that clings to your bones even after a full night's sleep. I hadn't just been cut from the budget. I'd been erased from relevance. And yet somehow, they still expected me to work, to submit quarterly analysis, to reply to executive emails with polished reports and clean charts. As if my silence meant I was fine. As if my dignity could be neatly tucked into a spreadsheet cell and formatted out of view. I stopped replying. I started listening. To hallway whispers, to shifted calendars, to sudden promotions that didn't make sense on paper. I tracked everything, not with anger but precision, because something in me had changed, not broken, not bent, sharpened. It happened on a Thursday. I had stayed late to finish an asset allocation report that no one had actually asked for, but I knew it would be needed. Quiet work, the kind no one noticed unless it went missing. I was heading back to the elevator when I heard voices coming from Langford's office. The door was cracked and the hallway was dim. I paused, not out of curiosity, but instinct. My name was the first thing I heard. "She's not a risk," Langford was saying. "She's quiet. She's easy to manage. We can phase her out without much noise. HR is already on board. No severance risk, no legal liability. And look, her numbers still look solid on paper. She's still producing. This is the kind of efficiency we want the new board to see." I didn't move. I didn't blink. "She's also alone," he added. "No husband, no mentor, no one advocating for her. I've checked. She's not connected, not protected." The other voice, someone from HR I assumed, gave a small laugh. Cold but smart. Cold but smart. That was the moment something inside me stopped hurting and started calculating. Not rage, not revenge, focus. Have you ever reached that moment when the hurt no longer stings, but sharpens you? When your tears dry up and you suddenly see everything with crystal clarity? It's not about fighting anymore. It's about preparing. If you've ever felt that shift inside you, I want to hear what came next. I didn't go home that night. I walked to a 24-hour diner, ordered a coffee I barely touched, and opened my laptop. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I started tracing every move Langford had made in the last 6 months. I remembered how he'd cut the travel budget for my team, yet somehow approved a $14,000 conference trip for Jenna in marketing. I remembered how he'd insisted on reclassifying my role as non-essential while padding the title of one of his direct reports to Vice President of Client Optimization, a title that didn't exist in any org chart. I remembered the justification memos he demanded from us, but never submitted himself. I pulled receipts, emails, memos, finance logs, budget justifications, promotions, calendar histories. I used the same tools I'd built to protect the company from waste and turned them inward. By dawn, I had a 22-slide internal audit report. Neat, precise, unemotional. The kind of report that doesn't scream, it buries. But I didn't send it. Not yet. Because power, real power, isn't about timing the strike. It's about letting your enemy feel safe just long enough to make a mistake they can't walk away from. That Friday, Langford passed by my desk with his usual fake smile. "Working hard, I see," he said. I smiled back, calm as glass. "Always." He had no idea. By now, word had gotten around that I'd been restructured. Some people avoided me. Others offered awkward encouragement. A few, the ones who once benefited from my quiet efficiency, now parroted Langford's lines like good soldiers. It didn't bother me. Not anymore. I was no longer trying to survive. I was preparing. Each move I made was deliberate. I started reviewing executive summaries Langford had submitted to the board, flagging inconsistencies. I dug into department-level expense reports, highlighting patterns. Some of the changes he pushed had saved the company money, but some were smoke and mirrors. Savings that had simply been redistributed under new names, titles inflated, roles duplicated, friends promoted. He thought no one was watching, but I was. Silently, thoroughly. And I was no longer afraid of using my name. I drafted an email, not to HR, not to Langford, but to the executive leadership team. I didn't attach the full report, just a preview. 3 slides, a taste of what I'd compiled, enough to raise an eyebrow. I signed it. Sophia Harwicki, Strategic Finance Lead, Axiom Corp. I hovered my finger over the send button. My silver pen rested on the desk beside me, the same one my father gave me when I started this job. I picked it up, held it between my fingers, and remembered what he told me. Don't ever ask for your place. Prove it so they can't deny it. I smiled, just barely. Then I hit send. And with that, the countdown began. The email had been sent. 3 slides, no accusations. Just data. Tidy, quiet, undeniable. I didn't include my full report. Not yet. I wanted the silence that followed to work in my favor. I wanted Langford to keep smiling, to keep believing he was untouchable. That Monday, something shifted. At 9:12 a.m., I received an unexpected meeting invite. Preliminary review, internal budget concerns. Sent by the executive office. No agenda. Just my name, a time, and the words, "Your analysis caught our attention." I accepted without hesitation. Langford, of course, hadn't said a word. At 10:03 a.m., he breezed past my desk like everything was perfectly in control. The same practiced smile, the same offhanded, "Looking forward to your Q2 projections, Sophia." And for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The meeting was held on the 34th floor, where the glass turned darker and the voices got colder. 2 executives joined me, people I'd only ever seen in quarterly town halls and on the company's investor decks. One had a legal pad, the other had the slides I sent, printed and annotated. "Walk us through this," one of them said. "We want to understand what we're looking at." I took a breath, and I began. No theatrics, no bitterness, just numbers, patterns, anomalies. Budget cuts that weren't cuts. Promotions that came with expense accounts larger than their job functions required. Job titles that had no reporting structures. Compensation justifications with no actual metrics attached. They asked smart questions. I answered calmly, precisely. When they probed about how I'd gathered this, I pointed to internal systems I'd built myself. There was no way to argue with it. It was their own data, just finally being seen for what it was. At the end, I handed them a sealed envelope. Inside was the full audit, 22 pages, with sources, and my signature, Sophia Harwicki, Strategic Finance Lead. Neither of them flinched at the name. But one of them did pause, pen hovering. "Harwicki. Any relation to—" I met his eyes. "That's not relevant to this conversation." A small nod. That was enough. The meeting ended with a quiet, firm handshake. Back at my desk, I sat down slowly, hands folded. Langford walked by again, still unaware, still oblivious. That afternoon, I received a reply from one of the execs. Next steps under review. Please remain discreet. I smiled at the wording. Discreet was what I did best. But make no mistake, I wasn't hiding anymore. I was simply waiting, and waiting is a skill, when done with intention. By the end of the day, a second meeting invite hit my inbox. Full committee review, Wednesday at 10 a.m. This time, it wasn't just internal. Legal was CC'd, Langford wasn't. And with that, the edges of his illusion began to fray. Wednesday arrived, gray and still. The kind of morning that holds its breath. I wore navy, clean lines, no jewelry, hair back, face neutral. I didn't want to look powerful. I wanted to look prepared. At exactly 9:58 a.m., I stepped into the executive boardroom. Glass walls, long table, a row of bottled waters with labels perfectly aligned. Every detail in this room was designed to make you feel small. But I didn't. Langford was already there. He looked up when I entered, his smile half-curved, half-cautious. Didn't realize you'd be attending this one. I said nothing, just took my seat across the table, calm, unmoved. Then the rest filed in. Legal, compliance, 2 VPs, 1 empty chair at the head of the table. Langford shifted in his seat. And then, quietly, the door opened one last time. My father walked in. No announcement, no ceremony, just presence. His face gave nothing away. He glanced around the room, nodded once, and sat. The room fell quiet. Langford blinked twice, his posture stiffening by instinct. "Let's begin," my father said. The head of compliance led the session. She clicked through my original slides, clean and damning, and then transitioned to the full audit. Langford started to interrupt. "These claims aren't exactly fair." My father raised a hand. "Let her speak." It wasn't a request. I walked them through every detail, line by line. No emotion, just data. Promotions approved with no merit logs. Travel budgets masked as vendor engagements. Department restructuring used to sideline top performers in favor of personal alliances. I ended with the cost of it all, nearly $1.2 million in misrepresented efficiency across 3 quarters. I didn't need to editorialize. The numbers spoke loud enough. When I finished, I closed my laptop. Silence stretched long and uncomfortable. Langford laughed nervously. "Look, with all due respect, this feels more like a vendetta than an audit." That's when I looked directly at him, for the first time. "I gave you the benefit of the doubt," I said quietly. "I thought maybe I was just collateral damage in a bigger strategy. But then I heard you say I was easy to eliminate, that I had no one." His face froze. "I didn't report you because I wanted revenge. I reported you because you were bleeding this company from the inside out, and you thought no one was watching." He turned to my father, his voice cracking. "This is clearly personal." But my father didn't flinch. "I wasn't even aware she submitted the report," he said. "And if I had been, I would have expected worse." There was a pause. Then compliance spoke again. "We've verified the record. Internal counsel has reviewed the documentation. The findings are accurate and deeply concerning." Langford's face drained of color. He stood, fumbling. I think I should speak with my own legal team." "You're free to do that," my father said, voice cool. "But effective immediately, your role as department head is suspended pending full investigation. Security will escort you from the building." Langford stared at him, then at me. And for the first time, I saw it. Not anger, not disbelief, fear. Because now he realized who I was. Not just the girl he thought was easy to erase, not just the analyst in the corner, not just a name on a payroll line. I was the one who had been watching, listening, waiting. And I had spoken, with receipts. Security entered quietly. Langford didn't resist. He kept his eyes low as they walked him out. No one said a word. After the door clicked shut, my father leaned forward and looked around the room. This isn't about hierarchy or bloodlines. This is about integrity. If someone like Sophia can spot this from where she sits, then we have a bigger problem than just one bad actor. I looked down at my silver pen resting beside my laptop. I didn't smile. Not yet, because this wasn't victory. This was only the beginning of rebuilding what someone else tried to burn. They offered me a promotion the following week, an official title bump, back pay, a corner office, and, ironically, a revised salary package, nearly double the one Langford cut. It was everything I was supposed to want, everything I had earned. I declined, not because I wasn't grateful, but because I wasn't ready to let my victory be turned into optics for someone else's redemption story. I didn't want to be the company's symbol of reform. I didn't need to be the face of what resilience looks like. I just wanted to do the work, quietly, fiercely, on my terms. So I stayed in my role. Same desk, same responsibilities, but everything around me had shifted. People looked at me differently now. The analysts who once avoided me in the break room now asked me for input. My name appeared on meeting invites I hadn't been on in over a year. There were more thank yous, more eye contact. But the thing that surprised me most was the silence. No one gossiped about Langford anymore. He disappeared as easily as he had risen. And I remained. I kept my silver pen on my desk, exactly where it had been through all of it. Not as a reminder of who gave it to me, but what I used it for: to record, to protect, to strike. At home, I opened a new savings account for my mother's medical needs and paid off the balance on her prescriptions. For the first time in months, I didn't have to check my bank app before going to the pharmacy. But there was one thing I couldn't quite put down. I kept replaying something Langford said behind that office door. She's not protected. He wasn't wrong. For most of my life, I worked hard to separate myself from my father's name. I didn't want the shortcut. I didn't want the whispers. I wanted to earn my place the long way. But maybe I'd gone too far trying to prove I didn't need help, so far that I'd isolated myself entirely. And that's what Langford had preyed on. Not weakness. Isolation. That was my turning point. I started mentoring 2 junior women in the company. Both brilliant, both quiet, both easy to overlook. I invited them to sit in on meetings. I forwarded them praise emails I once would have kept to myself. I shared my mistakes as much as my wins. Because legacy isn't built in titles. It's built in how you change the temperature of the room after surviving the fire. Some people think power is loud, that it's found in the corner office, the big speech, the decisive moment. But I learned that real power, the kind that changes rooms, cultures, outcomes, is almost always silent. It lives in the person who watches, listens, documents, waits. It lives in restraint. When I first sat in that stairwell, staring at my slashed paycheck, I thought I was alone. Thought maybe I was naive to think that doing things right, quietly, would protect me. That merit was enough. That integrity would somehow be recognized without applause. But I wasn't wrong. I was just early. And Langford? He was the kind of man who only understood volume. He mistook quiet for weakness, mistook strategy for submission. He thought I had no one. But he forgot. I had myself. That was always the difference. He needed an audience. I just needed a plan. And when the time came, I didn't rage. I didn't shout. I just told the truth, with evidence, with precision, with a calm so unsettling that even the most seasoned executives went still. I remember looking at his face when he realized it was over, that everything he built on manipulation and ego had been unraveled by the very person he tried to erase. And all I had done was stay. I didn't storm the castle. I became the foundation under it. And when it cracked, he fell through. It wasn't revenge. Not really. It was clarity. Now, months later, I walk the same halls. People still whisper, but not the way they used to. There's respect now. And with it, a quiet weight. The unspoken expectation that I'll lead the right way, that I'll protect people who are still learning how to protect themselves. And maybe that's what survival becomes, not just making it through, but becoming the kind of person who pulls others with them. I don't need a bigger title. I don't need applause. I just need to know that when someone else's silence is mistaken for weakness, I'll be close enough to remind them it's not. Sometimes the most powerful stories aren't told by the loudest voices, but by the ones who waited, documented, and struck only when the time was right. If you've ever been overlooked, underpaid, or silenced at work, what did you do when enough was enough? Did you stay quiet? Did you walk away? Or did you fight back in your own way? I'd love to hear your story, because this wasn't just about me. It's about everyone who's ever been told they were replaceable, only to prove they were the reason everything held together. So tell me, what did they underestimate about you?